So the marketing communications industry is, I think, in an incredibly strong and powerful position to create change. It is what it's designed to do, isn't it? It's designed to drive audience behaviour, to raise awareness, to create understanding, to build support for new ideas, to sort of, tackle taboos, etc., etc. So the industry overall is really desperately needed. I mean, it's very easy to say now more than ever, but now more than ever.
Welcome to the Impact Files podcast. I'm your host, Ned Wells, and I'm really pleased you're here.
Welcome to the Impact Files podcast. And in this episode, we're delighted to be joined by Amanda Powell-Smith, Chief Executive of Forster Communications. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. Lovely to be here.
So Amanda, perhaps we could start with an introduction to yourself, to Forster, and the work that you do.
Yes, of course. So Forster is a purpose-led communications agency. We were founded back in 1996 with one ambition, which is to use the power of communications to protect and improve lives. And so nearly 30 years later, that is still our ambition. It's still our purpose. It's still what we do. And we obviously have a sort of evolving portfolio of different clients and who we work with and what we do. I joined in 2001, so also quite a long time ago, and now am very privileged to be chief executive and leading the team there. It's a great role.
Fantastic role. And I'd love to get an idea of the scale of the business.
Yes, of course. So we are a small business. We are about 2.7 to 3 million turnover, a core team of 23 people, and really a model which is where we want to be the best at what we do. And so we surround ourselves by allies and partners and collaborators who are also the best in what they do and bring those in when needed. So we're specialists in our core services. We are growing. We will continue to grow. We don't have an ambition to sort of take over the world or anything. It's about being the best and working with the others the best and delivering great services around that.
And what sort of organisations do you work with when it comes to your clients?
Well, we're quite we're because of what we do, which is all purpose-led. We're actually very selective about who we work with. But we place ourselves deliberately at the centre of change. So we work with private sector organisations, some of the big established businesses, and those like Unilever or Patagonia or BMW across their sustainability agenda. We work with some of the big global organisations like World Economic Forum or Consumer Goods Forum, again across sustainability, or we work with charities and civil society organisations, Centrepoint, National Education Union, and a range of other more B2B facing organisations. And then increasingly, we're doing a lot with sort of scale ups. So some of the really exciting new solutions that are coming on by, whether it's nature tech or climate tech, how can we help them to scale and grow and change the system that is currently in place. So a range, and very much one of the things that we do and we believe in is it takes all sectors of all organisations to connect across. So working across different, whether it's private or public and not for profit, actually is incredibly important to create change around that.
Sure, we're going to touch on that more a little bit later on. When we spoke off air, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, you mentioned Forster's origin story, and I'd love to hear just a little bit about that because it's really quite interesting.
Yes, so we were founded by Gilly Forster, and she had been marketing director of the Body Shop, working sort of hit with Anita Roddick and the team to grow the Body Shop and build that, and really using and demonstrating that business can be a force for good. So all the campaigning that the Body Shop used at shop windows for, but also all its sort of chains, supply chain, etc. really leading in that area. And of course, we take that sort of thing a bit more for granted now, but it was incredibly progressive in those days. And then so when Gilly wanted to form a business of her own, that was the essence of what came together. And it seemed, and of course, it was all about business being a force for good. So not only through our purpose to use the power of communication to protect and improve lives, but it was what could we do as a business to really stand out in the way that we look after our staff and we work with our suppliers, we embed ourselves in the community, and how we can lead that journey. So even from that time, 1996 onwards, we were looking at impact reports ourselves. What difference were we making? It's probably then not a surprise that we're a founding UK B Corp, and that's 10 years ago. They've just celebrated 10th anniversary of B Corp. And we're always trying to push ourselves really and think, what else can or should we be doing, and how can we try things out? I think that's the joy of being a small business, really. You can try things, and you can test things, and you've almost got that flexibility there that you don't necessarily have in a really large organization.
I mean, to have been operating in that area 30 years ago, to be helping organizations to be more sustainable, I mean, it's something that we talk about a lot now, and certainly when you're in the B Corp world, it's very much just natural language, and the organizations that you've said you work with and you part with, that's all very much day to day, even though it's potentially not a conversation that as many organizations that we'd like are having. But 30 years ago, it was really quite rare. So and I'd be fascinated to hear, looking across that 30-year kind of time span, things have changed enormously.
Yes, things have changed enormously, and as I said, our client base has changed as well, and language has changed. So at that time, there was the rise into corporate social responsibility as an area and a phrasing, and whilst that is still used sometimes, it's now much more about sustainability, and obviously what we've got now is really strong push for a lot of organizations on decarbonisation and the rise in the technology that didn't even exist back in that time. So environmental and social change is the core, whatever you call it. How can we look after people and look after planet, and then which organizations are leading on that? And I think what we've seen has always required not-for-profit organizations, the charity sector, the civil society. They're always leading in this area. The government comes and goes in some ways according to who's leading what, and also according to what budgets and things there are. But what we've seen is an incredible rise in the private sector as well, and that's exciting. So how can we keep that going, and how can that be embedded?
I think that's so exciting, because that's where, being as we are in the capitalist economy, that's where the money is, and that's going to drive this sort of area. Particularly in the face of it being increasingly difficult to raise funds for charities who do this essential work, and the sort of uncertainties of various administrations around the world. You never quite know what's going to come next. It can be fairly short term. So that's all really exciting. Ruth, over to you, if I may.
Thanks, Amanda. That was such a great overview of the business. As someone who's in communications, it's so interesting to hear how you were sort of pioneering that such a long time ago. I think one thing that's come up a lot for Ned and I in these chats is the sort of need for this solid client framework. And you've obviously got yours pretty well solid by now. You've had a lot of chance to refine it over the years. So if you could tell us maybe a little bit more. You mentioned that you're very selective about who you work with, but it'd be interesting to hear how this works more the day-to-day, I guess, in terms of how you can incorporate, multiple viewpoints and opinions across the business. I work in a much, much smaller agency, and I find that it can be challenging at times with just the 5 of us. So I'd love to hear a bit more about how you manage that with a slightly bigger team.
Yes, of course. And so just firstly, just to put that into context again, as I keep saying, we're a small business. And so when we look at our impacts internally as an organization, of course, they're relatively small as well. So the biggest way that we can make an impact is who we choose to work with and who we choose to bring on board as our suppliers. So so that selection and client engagement principles that were, the sort of the formal terminology around it, is incredibly important. And we have some clear red lines in that what things that sectors we definitely won't work for. They won't surprise you in terms of weapons, tobacco, and actually now people who are dominantly producing fossil fuels. So we join Clean Creatives, and that's a red line for us as well. We have some obvious yeses as well, things that of course we're going to do and you do end up with a sort of grey area in the middle sometimes around, okay, this is an organization, no one is perfect. No organization is even people who are really progressive will be calling out sort of issues that they want to solve. But the question for us when we look at people who aren't on the wrong side of our red line but are in a space where it might be a little bit more complicated is that we will look for evidence and data about what they're committed to, and that's where we find things like have they signed up to science-based target principles? Are they members of the Living Wage campaign? What are they signed up to publicly that they're doing and tracking and following? And also then particularly at the role that we're going to be playing, is it genuinely going to be adding to a positive contribution to change in the solution? And that requires research, and sometimes we bring in an independent person to do some research, and it also then requires a discussion between directors and to make that decision. And in recognition, you're balancing a lot of stuff because you want if you take food or agriculture, everybody needs to be able to eat. There is a massive rise in the cost of food, but you might also have some views about which food is right or wrong. So you're juggling quite a lot of things, and there's if you change a small piece of a big system, you might have a bigger overall impact than if you change a big piece of a very small system. So that's a long answer to your question. It's as evidence-based as we can make it, combined with our judgment as a business who is coming back to this purpose of wanting to use communication to protect and improve lives. And that's what helps us make that decision.
Yeah, so insightful. And so interesting that you've sometimes used third parties as well. I think that's the first time that I've come across that before. So really interesting. One thing you mentioned, obviously, this sort of like complicated web of sustainability that we're in today's world. Given that Forster has been operating for kind of 30 years, do you feel that it's become more complicated in that time? When you set out, was it a lot more clear cut in terms of who you will work with, who you won't work with? Given the sort of systems world that we live in, and also I guess greenwashing, everybody trying to want to show that they're an impactful business for sales purposes. Has it become any more different and complicated for you?
I think the thing that's possibly become more complicated is that our client base is much bigger now. We do much more work with internationally based organisations and with big multinationals who have quite long and complicated supply chains. So that is that I think whether that's more or less complicated because of time or whether it's more or less complicated because we've evolved. That's there. But in some ways it's become easier because you've got more information about organisations online and more demand for transparency, and you have got systems set up which are are they as I say science-based targets or Women Business Coalition, or what are they publicly pledging to and committing to? So that's in the private sector. So it's a bit of both, I think, probably.
Amanda, I'd love to hear if you could think of any examples of clients or potential clients that you sort of assessed and deemed suitable, and then found out eventually that perhaps they weren't so suitable, and were there any kind of learnings out of that you could share?
Yes, I mean I'm not going to name any organisations, but I think
No.
sometimes sometimes a genuine intent can only come from working with an organization and seeing inside. And actually that's where you can be positively surprised as well as negatively surprised. So, understanding the difficulty that the stakeholder, the individual you might be working with, to push change through an organization. Actually, if we can help them, that's going to make a massive difference. So it might make you lean more into some of the more complicated sectors. At the other end, we do turn things down. We turn down quite a number of briefs each year because we can't see that even if we help them with a particular project or particular change, we can't see how that fits into an overall system of sustainability, and therefore we're not actually supporting a positive outcome overall. So what's the key learning? What is the key learning? It's to be constantly inquisitive and asking questions, and to never stop. I think it's that way of always seeing what's in front of you rather than seeing what you want to see, and not being afraid to sort of really try and understand some of the why around that.
I imagine there are situations where you're potentially working with a very sort of sustainably minded individual with an organization who is key to do all the right things, but perhaps the organization isn't quite ready for the work they want to do and the work that they're talking to you about.
Exactly that, and I think the bigger sometimes organisations are, you have to the slower it is to create some change. It doesn't make them bad people or bad organisation. It's just the reality of what happens within that. And I think as someone who is, that's in a way where the challenge comes if you're running a business, a principles-led business, if you like. But you also still need to have a certain income. You need to be able to pay, etc. So that's where you're constantly juggling these choices, and I think that's where you need to try and have a portfolio from our point of view of clients, so you've got options, and so that you can say no, which is again, I recognize is a privileged position to be in when it's a hard fight for work, I think sometimes.
Sure.
So you mentioned, I guess we've touched on the external side of that purpose in terms of your client framework, and trying to maintain, you mentioned it yourself, the juggling act between being able to pay salaries but being values led. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit on the the more internal initiatives you have and the sort of people and processes that you put in place to support the business's needs to be sustainable and profitable.
Thank you. So, I mean, we're a people-based business. We're offering services to our clients from our team, and that means that it's really critical that our team are well in the broadest sense of the word, because sometimes we are dealing with quite a lot of tricky issues, and climate change and inequality and etc. So needing to look after people in a mental and physical health way is really key. One of the things that we do is encourage sustainable travel. It started as how do we cut our carbon emissions as a business, and that was about encouraging people to be able to walk or cycle to the office. And that is incentivized by every journey that someone walks or cycles to the office. They get a 5 minutes additional holiday, which could be 10 minutes a day, which if you did it every day can add up to 2 and a bit days extra holiday. And it's been in place for a while. It is incredibly successful. It's supported by helping people sort of access bikes, obviously through salary sacrifice, but also colleagues will buddy up and help them get to work if they live in the same area, and so that whole sort of familiarity on cycling has been really key. Actually, it's not just good for cutting carbon; it's really good for well-being as well, which is it's had a sort of double impact on that. And actually, that's been a really nice example of something which we started, which ended up doing two things instead of one.
I'd love to ask, what's the forum within the business for where you sort of come up with these kinds of ideas?
So it's a longer story on that one, if that's okay. A few years ago, I can't remember exactly when, B Corp had a Boardroom 2030 initiative, which was to ask people to imagine what the boardroom should look like in 2030. And so we invited all our staff and team to get involved in that, and recognizing again, as a small business, there is quite often not very much churn at the sort of more senior level. So how can you increase participation when people like me have been there for a very long time? And what that resulted in, having had sort of people joining the board and in a sort of temporary basis, and it's resulted in more colleague-led working groups. So we now have a colleague-led impact group and a colleague-led diversity and inclusion group, and they are ongoing. So a number of years later, those now have a formal remit. They report to the board, and they are responsible for delivering different ideas, different initiatives, and involving the rest of the company in coming up with those. It's been really successful.
That's so great to hear. Thank you. Flipping the coin slightly, have there been any initiatives that haven't worked so well? If you're happy to share any that maybe or were more challenging.
We had some challenging conversations around becoming a plant-based office, which was when we were again looking at how can we cut our impact as a business. It came up in a brainstorm from everybody, but could we cut out the company doing sort of, people didn't mind cutting meat, but cutting dairy as well.
I was going to say, save milk. Yeah, it was coffee.
It was really interesting, and it wasn't about us telling everyone what they ate themselves. They can bring and buy what they want to, but it was what the company was going to buy. We are a plant-based office. It just took quite 2 or 3 months for everyone to talk through the idea and understand what it meant. And actually, again, for us all to be able to find tasty alternatives, so that people weren't compromising on sort of enjoyment. It wasn't like a punishment food. In fact, so now it's there. Of course, there are tasty alternatives. Of course, in fact, it's become easier and easier over the last few years because there are many more really high quality. If you're going out for a team meal or something, vegan places to eat, etc. So it took a while, but it's really accelerated, and it's the right thing to do. And the other thing that's difficult, I've sort of mentioned it already, but as a small business, we are challenged on the diversity of within the company. We score very well on quite a few metrics, but not so much on ethnic diversity. So how can we drive that forward? And again, one of the things that we do in response to that is run an internship program in partnership with, for us, it's the Taylor Bennett Foundation, who's an industry organisation, and recognise that we can be more flexible in creating access and early stage interventions with people, because it's where we can do things quickly and support people. And then, of course, we have all the recruitment policies and everything in place. But given that we don't have an ongoing recruitment action, that's a slower way of creating change. So we've had to really think a bit laterally about how we address that.
When you say early stage interventions, what sort of things are you talking about there?
So Taylor Bennett supports people from minoritized backgrounds who are at university. So we're providing a 3-month paid internship over the summer holidays, or anything between 2 to 3 months, so that's helping give people experience where they can test and try PR and comms, and have start to build networks and have experience for CVs, etc.
Interesting. Amanda, I'd like to turn to looking really in the sort of broadest context of communications, media, marketing. Forster's position on communications in driving a sustainable future. Now, I know that's in one way, that's an enormous question because it's what you're all about. But I'd love to, if there's a way of sort of summarizing that, that would be fascinating. And then I think it's about the bear traps, isn't it? It's about how do you motivate people and steer that route between greenwashing and green hushing. So I'd love to hear your views on that.
Yes, of course. So the marketing communications industry is, I think, in an incredibly strong and powerful position to create change. It is what it's designed to do, isn't it? It's designed to drive audience behavior, to raise awareness, to create understanding, to build support for new ideas, to sort of, tackle taboos, etc., etc. So the industry overall is really desperately needed. I mean, I mean, it's very easy to say now more than ever, but now more than ever, because
Yes.
you've got it would it's hard at the moment. You've got as change pushes through, and as some of the status quo does start to be upturned, and we show that we can have a rise in renewable energy, and we can have change that. You see an increase of pressure from the status quo, the people who are making a lot of money out of what's already there at the moment. You can see the rise in the counter narratives. You can see the rise in people kicking back and saying that the sustainable futures and solutions are wrong. And so we need more than ever a really powerful narrative that shows not just that the change is needed to sort of counter the disaster and the climate change, but that it brings benefits for people today, tomorrow, and for the future. So all those skills in marketing and communications are so important for helping us all to build a positive future. I mean, we've joined Clean Creatives, as I've said before, as our way of putting a line in the sand around what we will and won't do. I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but I would say imagine if everyone was really thinking about, and using all those marketing skills to push for positive change. And that comes down to greenwash as well. I mean, what we need now is trust. We need to know who we can trust. We need transparency. We need authenticity. We've got so much content everywhere, channels, so much noise. How do people know what's real? There's a whole rise in misinformation and disinformation. And so right down to that sort of real voices and real evidence is really important.
And as a provider in the sort of communications marketing space, but really focused on impact, how are you finding the market? What are budgets looking like at the moment, and the sort of competition that you find yourself facing?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough economic climate and a sort of big geopolitical shifts since sort of last autumn, and particularly over the change in US administration in the new year as things have come through. And with that has had to come a real sort of repositioning of quite a lot of the sustainability actions and programs, just to reiterate that they are they're common sense, that they are linked to sort of positive outcomes and opportunities for organizations as well as for individuals. So whilst at the beginning of the year, quite a lot of organisations sort of went, "Oh, I'm not going to say anything." Actually, we're seeing, certainly over the last few months, people are just slowly, softly coming out again of actually showing that they are doing. They haven't stopped doing the work. They know that they need to tackle issues. They know that they need to. They are rebuilding confidence, I think, probably in talking about it. So yeah, it is different this year, certainly to 2 years ago, in terms of the feel in communications.
And I'd love to hear your take on the topic of sort of longer organizations positioning for longer term sustainability being a positive driver of, shorter term revenue. I mean, is that a conversation you find yourself having with people, or is investment in sustainability being done because it's the right thing to do, but not necessarily going to drive the sort of economic fortunes of an organization.
It's definitely not about just being the right thing to do. It has to be linked through to being economically sustainable itself, if you like. So there has to be a return. I think people are getting happier to talk about that. The phasing of returns might be slightly different. So where you might take longer, and you might look at impact metrics as well as just financial metrics. So what are we seeking to achieve here? It's more multidimensional than just one-dimensional. But at the end of the day, it is about making sure that organisations have the resources they need, that they have staff who are fit and well, they have talent, and they have future. And if you want to, if you need cotton, for example, then you're going to have a big problem if it's 40 degrees heat and you cotton pickers trying to pick cotton in that heat, unless you're looking after that. So what are you doing to mitigate that? And similar for cocoa, there's a lot in the press around the price of chocolate at the moment. That's a direct result of climate change and things happening there. So we're already seeing the impacts of extreme weather. And they are undeniable, and people running the businesses know that. That's why you get the global risks report, which comes out just before the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos each year, and you can see right up there as all the things of climate change risks which are there. So they're known. It's about talking about why we need to change them in a slightly different way at the moment.
And I'm so interested in that. And I think you're right. It does bring in extra elements of complexity and risk to individuals within organizations and to organizations, and the whole kind of phasing and the timing. And I'm guessing as well that in, the organizations that you choose to work with, because you can see that they're doing the right thing, those organizations could have people that are financially driven in the near term. That's their responsibility. That's what they care about. And so there's going to be a juggle there as well.
Money isn't bad. I mean, it's money's fine.
Exactly.
And it's just about, how you make it and how you use it and what you're turning it around to do. And I think we need to be, you need to be able to, organizations need to be able to generate some profit in order to be able to keep investing going forwards. But there's something at the moment in the scales of that which could I don't want to get into, but it's
sure
as a basic principle, it's okay.
Exactly. That's so interesting, Amanda. That's brilliant. I wonder if we could move on to hear about any plans or initiatives that you've got for the business over the next year or so.
Yes, I know. I can't believe it's the 2025 is nearly gone, but yeah, 2026. I think I'm excited about it. I think it feels like things are warming up in quite a fun way for us, and actually there is a lot to do. Certainly we are doing more and more in Europe, and that I get really sort of thrilled about. I get very energized by meeting peers and others from across different countries. So I can really see that growing. And actually, again, on the collaboration point, I'm really keen to sort of keep building. We've got some brilliant sort of partnerships with others whether they're in design and things like that. So I can just keep building those as a network. I can see more in that. And then very specifically, we've got the new B Corp standards that we need to get our heads into. So those will come out, and we will have to make sure we're ready for those. That will be a big thing for the year ahead.
Fantastic. And reflecting on what you were saying about working with European colleagues and partners, I found it incredibly uplifting, getting that slightly different perspective and sort of viewpoint from people outside the UK can be really energizing and value adding.
Yeah, I really agree, and we're always all better when we talk to each other. Across countries, etc. I think as I think when you're running a small business in particular, you need your peer-to-peer networks beyond your own business as well. I think that's incredibly important.
I'd like to start to wrap up by asking you where you hope the sector, however you sort of
Thanks,
care to
Amanda.
define that, where you hope the sector will be in 10 years' time.
Yeah, I find these things really difficult, but I would love the sector, all the organisations in the sector, to be having their own sustainability targets and to be transparently reporting on them in the broadest terms beyond carbon, but also how they are working through their sort of their own clients and their suppliers to look at things like impact on nature and impact on people through fair wages. And so on that, I would love everybody to be part of the living wage campaign and paying fully paid internships, which is, the only way we're going to create and help rise in tackle inequality.
And it sounds to me like there are going to be a number of links that these organisations and initiatives you've mentioned that we could share in the show notes.
Oh yeah, definitely. That'd be great.
And finally, one piece of advice for organisations pursuing sustainability and financial objectives.
I think, and it took me quite a long time to get there, but I think we should think about being small progressive businesses as not a sort of, but think about it as our superpower. By being small and by being keen, we can be agile. We can try things. We can ask the impossible. We can say why not. We can lead the way. And it's also okay because sometimes we can get it wrong, but we'll keep learning from it as well. And I think we should really, really lean into that in a way that larger organizations can't necessarily, because from that comes an incredible energy, and also comes your own sort of sense of learning, which then means you can work better with clients and know what they're going through as well. So small is good.
I love.
So recognize the power and the value of being a small and agile organization.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Try different things. Give them a go.
Yeah.
Nothing. We've got license to experiment.
Amanda, that's brilliant. How can people find out more about you and Forster?
Well, thank you. So we have a website, obviously, forster.co.uk, and we're pretty all over LinkedIn as well. So both the company and individuals.
Sure. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you. Really, really great.
Thanks for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it with your colleagues. For more about the podcast, about us, our marketing services, and our wider support for purpose-led organisations, please visit our website at theimpactfiles.co.uk.